What is up? What is poppin'? And what the fuck is going on? My friends, welcome back to another episode of the Modern Mastery Podcast, where we help you build yourself, build your business, and join the new 1% of individuals that are living a free and fulfilled life through self-development and online entrepreneurship. So today I have with me Save Your Sons, at Save Your Sons on Twitter, the man behind the Andy Griffith profile picture. And I got to see this man. I got to see this man through the screen, but this guy is jacked. This guy is handsome. This guy has long, luscious hair. And this guy is true to the message that he puts out behind an anonymous brand. We dive into this a bit, but it was super cool to get to meet this guy and connect on that personal level. And in this episode, we talk about becoming an engaged father, pursuing your purpose fully, and the need for self-improvement as a man. Now, for my ladies out there, I know there are a few of you that listen to this podcast. This advice is mainly for men. So keep that in mind. If you plan to listen all the way through, view it from that lens. Some advice may or may not be applicable to you, but it may be helpful in helping you navigate the modern world of masculinity and femininity and how all of that stuff plays a role. And you can think of the polarity that goes into that. Before we get into it, let's talk about Modern Mastery HQ. MMHQ is a tight-knit community of people that want a streamlined way to starting and growing an online business so you can monetize the things that you love learning about in your free time, create more free time for yourself, and work from anywhere in the world. Building a business is a necessary step to self-actualization. It gives you the freedom and resources, like money, to further pursue your purpose and fuel your development. That's the second part of MMHQ, is personal development. In the world of entrepreneurship, this is a must. You don't have a boss telling you everything you need to do. You need to become self-sufficient. You need to master your mind, body, and spirit. We help you do all of these things through trainings, articles, step-by-step action plans to implement the advice from those, and live calls for personalized help because your situation is unique. So if you want to steal our proven processes, strategies, and systems for becoming a sovereign individual, go to join.modernmastery.co and join today. And if you want to skip all of the do-it-yourself stuff and join an intensive 6-month program that guarantees business and personal success, we have the Mastery Program as well. And you can apply to that at join.modernmastery.co/program. And links to both of those will be in the show notes. Now, last but not least, I have a few favors to ask that cost a whopping $0. If you enjoyed this podcast, subscribe or follow. It's one button click away, and it truly helps support the growth of this podcast. And then you can leave a rating letting us know what you thought. You can tag us at Modern Mastery on Twitter or at Modern Mastery HQ on Instagram, or tag Joey or I with a link to this episode and some kind words. If you do all three, send us a DM and we'll have something special for you in return. So without further ado, let's dive right into this episode of the Modern Mastery Podcast. And yes, we're live. Save Your Sons. What is going on, man? How are you?
Dan, I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here. I am enjoying a night at the house with a rambunctious 16-month-old upstairs. So if you hear any running around or screaming, that is what that is.
Yeah, no problem, man. I can't relate, actually, but completely understandable. And I'm sure the listeners will understand too. So yeah, I'm super excited to have you here. I've been clearly a longtime follower, and we are in a very similar space. We talk about very similar things. So I feel like this is going to be a fucking awesome conversation. But my first question to you is your profile picture, because
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen that guy in many different places, but I'll let you tell me, who is it and like what's the meaning behind it. Because I'm guarantee that the choice, you choosing that picture was very intentional for your brand.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And people, it's funny. Like when I picked it, I sort of thought like everybody's gonna know who this is. But and I'm not even that old. I'm like younger than I think people usually think. I'm almost in my mid 30s. And so like it makes me feel like a really old guy when other people are like, who the heck, who is that picture? But it is Andy Griffith. Andy Griffith. He is an old Southern American comedian, sitcom actor. He was in the Andy Griffith Show, which was a long-running show on like CBS or one of those networks way back in the 60s and 70s. And he plays himself. He plays a sheriff of a small town in North Carolina named Andy Griffith. And the reason I chose him, there's a few reasons. A, I just think he's the man. I'm a legitimate fan of Andy Griffith. He also was Matlock. He was Matlock too years later. That was
Who's
another.
Matlock?
Matlock was a TV lawyer. He was it was like Murder She Wrote, but with like a dude. So he was he was Matlock, and he was Andy Griffith from the Andy Griffith Show. And I chose him because the Andy Griffith Show is what I consider one of the best portrayals of a father-son or father-child relationship in media history. And if you follow Save Your Sons, I know Dan, you and I think similarly about this, but one of the main issues that I see right now when it comes to the depictions of fathers and families in media is that there aren't a lot of good examples to follow. And the media right now is, for whatever reason, it's hard to find a lot of good examples of a strong family life and people being intentional about their kids in the way that you used to see all the time on TV. So me picking Andy Griffith was just sort of a hat tip to somebody that I thought was a great example of a good engaged dad, but it's also a broader commentary on the state of our current media landscape and hearkening back to days when it was pretty different.
Nice. I like that a lot.
He's good, man.
And
check out, dude. This podcast is now about Andy Griffith. I could talk about him for an hour. His son was played by Rod Howard, who is the guy who was in like Happy Days, and then he directed like the Da Vinci Code and a bunch of really famous Hollywood movies. So he went on to he grew up to be a famous Hollywood director, but he got his start playing Andy Griffith's son on this really famous old TV show.
Nice. So is this the stuff that... Yeah. I went to trivia night last night, actually. It was a good time.
Oh man, you gotta text me next. Oh, that's the cheating, so you can't do that.
Yeah. No, I'll just shoot you the questions because I know fucking none of the answers. I'm just there to hang out with friends and have a good time. But are these shows like what you grew up on? Because it's super interesting to me to hear this, because I grew up on fucking like SpongeBob and Fairly Odd Parents, and I wouldn't take that back. I love SpongeBob and Fairly Odd Parents, but is this the stuff you grew up on? Because and was it black and white? That's the other thing. Like, I can't watch black and white stuff, man. I don't know if it's just like how I was raised, but whenever I go back home and my dad and uncles live together, and so they'll always throw on like an old black and white show, and I'll sit there and I'm just thinking the whole time, how do you guys watch this? Like, I can't stay engaged. Maybe that says a lot about the whole, like, everyone's attention spans are decreasing, because I feel like I would have to focus very, very hard on like the actual show to pay attention or to understand what's going on and follow the storyline and all of that stuff.
It's true, man. I didn't grow up on, well, kinda. So I grew up like in the 90s. And so it was like Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, and like Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles. That was my go-to. And my parents didn't love when I watched that stuff, so it was like I had to like sneak around to watch it. And and like I had like a friend in kindergarten who had like a portable TV. I don't know if you ever seen one that has like a big radio antenna on it. And you could like tune it to the channel where Power Rangers would come on, and we would like sneak and like watch it under the desk when no one was watching.
Yeah.
But so that's what I watched, and I watched way too much of it. And my parents were like really conscious of the effect that screens could have, kind of ahead of their time, and so they really tried to limit the amount that I watched. But I mean, you're a kid, that stuff is like just pure dopamine. It's just like you just want to watch it, and it's fun. We can talk later about like the how much even worse it is now. But
Yeah.
the Andy Griffith show was like, it was one of those shows. It was like Gilligan's Island, those like classic shows that kind of would come on like Nick at Night. So you watch Nickelodeon, and then like 7 p.m. comes and it turns into Nick at Night, and that's when they just roll out all the old like black and white or classic TV sitcoms. So I would watch it some then. That was my first exposure to it, and I watched a lot of that, and a lot of what else was on there, like Gilligan's Island. I Dream of Jeannie. That was a popular one that was on back then. Bewitched. Those are the ones I remember specifically. But it's funny though, because you mentioned like the attention span, and I feel the same way, and I really think it's a result of, or a big factor in it is even when we were kids watching some of those newer shows. I mean, they cut scenes every 2 seconds, and so like your brain is getting conditioned to focusing on one thing for 2 seconds, and then the next scene comes, and then you focus on that for 2 seconds, and the next scene comes, and you focus on that for 2 seconds. And so it does really become hard to sit down and focus on one thing for a while, because if you watch 2-3 hours of TV a day, well, that's 20% or however many percent of your waking hours is spent just like stimulated to the max, watching things jump across your screen. And I think it's only gotten worse. So the Andy Griffith thing plays in again there, because I think the media that our kids are watching now is even more extreme than the SpongeBob or the. I was a few years older than you, so mine was like Rugrats and like Doug and
I
Ren and
watched.
Stimpy. Yeah.
Rugrats. That was my shit.
But but it's even worse now. It's like you watch some of the stuff that's made for kids. It's like a lot of it's really inappropriate for kids, in my opinion. But that's my opinion. But it's also just really, really fast paced, and you wonder what's going on in their tiny little brains. And it's been completely hacked by this like onslaught of fast cut scenes and loud noises and bright colors flickering on and off. And it's like, how is that okay for like a 4 or 5-year-old to be taking in?
Yeah. No, I agree, man. And I mean, you mentioned earlier, we can dive into this a bit, but being like the main reason you liked Andy Griffith is because he was an engaged father, right? And so I've read The Way of the Superior Man like 5 times. I love that book. If you haven't read it, I'd check it out. But one of the biggest lessons that it promotes is that a man's deepest quality nowadays is his presence. Presence. And so something that I've noticed, because that's something I'm also very big on, is spirituality and just being in the present moment and listening and actually being there for conversations, being there for what you're actually doing, instead of floating off into your head and thinking about all the things you have to do, or thinking about the things that you watched earlier that day, or just like entertaining thoughts in your head instead of actually being there doing what you're supposed to do. And something I've noticed recently is, and especially I was sick recently, so I've been laying on the couch watching Netflix and being as active as I can. But when I feel like shit, like I'm just going to sit on the couch and watch Netflix. And so what I've noticed happening is that my attention span in real life is becoming much shorter. And I'm grateful that I'm actually aware of this and I can start to reverse it. But it's like every time that recently, when I'm out and with people, or not even out, just with people or on the phone with someone, like I'm just not there. I'm kind of just like spaced out. I'm listening to what they're saying, but when it comes to my time to speak, I am kind of just like, yeah, I'm very short with my answer, and I just want the conversation to be over. And then I take a step back and think about it, and that's not what I want at all, right? I want to actually be there for the conversations, especially with the people that I care about. So when you said that you liked him because he was an engaged father, is that kind of what you meant, or is there something more to that?
I think the presence piece that you talked about is exactly well. There's probably two sides, two pieces of it. The first piece is the presence, and I ask a lot on Twitter because I love hearing people's answers. But like, what qualities make up a good father? And the number one answer is always, always, always presence. Like just being there, and presence. I think the way people mean it isn't just like physically being in the house with the kid, but being in the moment with your kids and with your wife and your family and enjoying the moments and taking times to teach and to give good examples and to talk to them about their lives and what's important to them. And so that gets to the second piece that an engaged father really means to me is somebody who is intentional, who thinks a little bit about what they are doing when they are with their kids. So it's not just like I'm present and maybe like, yeah, you're running around playing games. Okay, that's good. But take it a step farther. What kind of lessons, what kind of takeaways do you want your kids to get from your engagement, your actions, your the times you're engaged with each other throughout the day? Thinking a little bit more about what sort of values you want to instill in your kids, what sort of life lessons you want to instill in your kids, how you're going to communicate those lessons. And I talk all the time. I think it's really important that we marry verbal and nonverbal communication. I don't think nonverbal communication alone is enough to let some of these lessons sink in. So there's the presence piece, and it's not just like my bones and flesh are in the same room as my kids. It's that I'm actually like focused on them and being with them and being in the moment, like you said. But then there's also, to be an engaged father, I take it a step further, and there's this engaged, intentional piece. So I'm thinking more broadly, a little longer time horizon of how I want to plan out exactly what I'm communicating to my kids and when.
Okay, and is this something that you've just been, I'm assuming not, but is this something you've been a natural at? Has it always been that case, or was there a time where you weren't like this and then some turning point that made you realize, hey, I have to be there, I have to be more present? And then how did you actually make that happen? Because I'm assuming it's pretty fucking hard to do on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I mean it's a habit, I think, like anything else, and or like most things. And so you have to be intentional about the way you build habits. And that's something that I've tried to do. But as far as like the being intentional with making a plan and thinking critically about what exactly you want to teach and how you want to teach it and how you want to communicate it, that really came for me. There was no like immediate light bulb moment, but it was just a product of myself coming of age. When I was 18, 19, 20, it was like for a lot of men, a lot of young men, that's a really, really hard period. And the reason it's hard is because you're coming of age and all of a sudden your value, when in high school you might be kind of cool and you might have friends and you can play on the football team or whatever. But then, and even if you have like supportive parents, like I was fortunate enough to have, you graduate high school or you graduate college and you're in the quote real world, a man especially, your value drops to zero. You are worthless. You like the second you are out on your own, you are just like you better show us what you got or get out of the way because other people are working and other people are trying to prove themselves and you're just another guy who's trying to make something of himself. So like show me what you got or shut up. And I didn't expect that. I had no expectation that that's what life was going to be like. And part of the reason why I thought a lot about it and talking to other guys kind of my age with parents who are in a similar generation is because parents of that generation, it wasn't common for them to instill that expectation in their kids. They weren't being and in no fault of their own. I mean, they were doing what they knew, but they weren't thinking like, okay, I got to warn my son that when he turns 18, he no one's coming to save him. There's no handouts. There's no free lunch. Like all those things we talk about. No, there was none of that sort of intentional communication or teaching to me and to a lot of guys in my generation, just by virtue of how our own parents came along and became of age. So I sort of had to go through that discovery process and development process in my early 20s on my own, and learned a lot, and that forms the bedrock for a lot of what I teach in my online community and in my essays and on Twitter. These sort of things, these life lessons that I was fortunate enough to learn the hard way, so that hopefully other people don't have to. And it's something that a lot of guys in my generation missed out on, and it's not because of any fault of the parents. In most cases, it's just where we're at. And if I can share some of that and share what I've learned, then I'll be doing my job.
Right. I love that, man. I really do. And I resonate. I mean, I resonate really hard with the value building, like building your own value, because that's something that I became very aware of actually during college. Is like, hey, once this is all over, I'm not going to be able to just screw around, go to class, and come back and hang out with my buddies all the time. Like, I'm going to have to either learn something on my own to do what I actually want to do, or I'm going to have to learn more in my major or what I'm studying to actually become competent enough to get a decent paying job after that. So I'm curious, what path are you going to have your sons go down in terms of maybe college, like a trade school, or just self-educating? What is your plan for that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I talk a lot as well. Like, I'm a relatively new dad, and so a lot of the really hard stuff that happens when kids get older and they become teenagers or even school age, you have to make really hard decisions, and you have to make decisions around discipline and really strict, how strict are you going to be, and things like that. We haven't had to cross that bridge yet, but it is something that we think about all the time. And I'm not one of those guys that is like, nobody needs college, you should forget about college, like you can do anything you need to do without college. I do think there's a lot to be said for that. I think that in a lot of cases you can be just as successful without college as you can, or not a lot of cases, a ton of cases, you can be just as successful without a formal education if you have the drive and the willingness to teach yourself things and to network on your own. Because that is one of the valuable aspects of college that remains even today, even though college is kind of a joke when you look at the return on investment that you get for it most of the time. There is still some value. It's hard to argue, I think. There's some value that remains around the networking side of things and the people that you meet. Because that feeling that you described, Dan, and that I was describing a minute ago, of like coming into the real world and all of a sudden, like, you're nothing. You're just like, if you want to achieve anything, it has to be something that you do on your own. What that is it doesn't matter how big of a fish you are in your high school pond or in your college pond, because no matter how big of a fish you are, those ponds are always going to be tiny compared to the ocean that is the real world. So it doesn't matter, like, even if you're at an elite school and you're at the top of your class, the second you get out into the real world, the competition is only going to get harder. The other people around you, the intelligence levels of the people around you, the achievement levels of the people around you are going to increase. They should be increasing every step that you take, every rung of the ladder that you climb. And that's exactly what happened to me. It's like I got out of, I thought I was a big deal, a big fish. And then I went to graduate school in the Northeast, and like everyone was smarter than me. And I was like, what how did this happen? Like, I thought I was like, I thought I was good. I thought like things just were easy and they worked out. And then you look around and you're like, wait a minute, like this is a big world. And there's a lot of really smart, really talented people here. And how am I gonna, what can I do to distinguish myself and find my own unique competitive advantage so that I can stand out and be successful in my own right? And that's a realization that a lot of guys in our generation or my generation, I think, aren't prepared for. And it's what happened to me. And as far as like what we're going to do with our kids, I think it's going to go back to what you were saying is like we're going to instill a certain set of values in them. And we've already started doing that. And my wife and I, before we had our son, we wrote down our values. We defined them with like page-long definitions and examples of like what each value means, and we talk about them frequently. We say, you know, today one of our values is improvement, self-improvement, and we say, okay, well today what did I do to improve myself? And we talk about these things at the dinner table, and we constructed the values in a way that we hope, if our kids internalize them and they use those values as the lens that they see their world through and the lens they use to make decisions, then no matter what they decide, they'll be doing it from the right starting point. So they won't be making a decision based on a faulty understanding of themselves and their in the world and their place in it. And to me, that's like, I'm not going to steer my kids to go one way or the other. Like if they really want to be a freaking doctor, okay, great, then you have to go to med school for that. That's the way it is. If they really want to be a mason and be an expert at masonry, okay, great, well, we know how to do that too. And if you instill the right foundation, which is built through values, I believe, then no matter what path they take, they're going to excel in it, and it's going to be the right path for them.
Damn, man. I really like that, and you're bringing back some memories about family dinner. I want to talk about that, but one thing that I'm noticing more and more on Twitter, or at least I'm like starting to notice the effects of it, especially money Twitter, where it's like, hey, do this business model, or do this business model, or do this business model. It's like that's the only thing I think about, and that's my entire worldview now. Is like I've completely forgotten about all of the other paths that like people can take. And you talking about that briefly brought back what I feel was very crucial in my development, and what actually led me to this point was just being very curious and actually pursuing something that I wanted to pursue, and something I'll hopefully be able to pass along to my kids as well, is because, and this is something my dad did, especially when I was signing up for college, is he didn't really care what I did. Like he was supportive whether I wanted to become an anesthesiologist because they made $300,000 a year, or if I wanted to go to graphic design school and possibly get a $50,000 job, right? He didn't care. It was just like, yeah, do what you think is going to be best for you, and then let the values that he instilled in me guide that. And that's what I ended up doing. I started out in marketing, and then I met some great people. I literally probably wouldn't be here if I didn't start out in marketing. It's really weird if I were to actually break that down. But a semester after I started, I ended up switching to like film. I went into film because I wanted to do something more creative. And then from that, it's like, okay, I have to do something that's actually going to make me money. And the job options aren't only like working on a film set or something. And so I went into this weird hybrid graphic design major and got bored of that and switched again, and then ended up landing on graphic information technology, which was like the crossover between like software engineering and actual design, and ended up self-studying.
Say that again. What's the name of it?
Graphic information technology.
I've never heard of that. I'm learning.
Yeah, it was some weird major on like an off campus, and I had to drive 40 minutes there. That's one reason why I started like self-studying to learn to code, and ended up dropping out because I got a job in web design, and then you can probably guess where that went later. It's freelancing with web design, and now transitioned into all this modern mastery stuff, and now we're here. So I tend to forget that, because it's like, okay, well, yeah, I kind of have a path that I can have people take, where it's like, yeah, learn a skill, learn to sell, do this, that, and the other. And I think that message is great, but I also think that we're missing the curiosity pursuit. And I could ramble on all day about this because after reading The Art of Impossible, great book, it really showed me the importance of that curiosity pursuit. Because if people aren't actually pursuing what they're curious in, what they are curious in pursuing, not what someone else told them to be curious in pursuing, it's going to be very hard to maintain that intrinsic drive to actually make progress in that area. Like, I can tell you to go to the gym every single day of the week, but if you don't have that curiosity and you don't fuel that by going and researching and like watching YouTube videos and getting that motivation and then going and seeing progress in the gym yourself and like having that journey be self-driven, it's going to be very hard to maintain that over the rest of your life, right? And so that's one thing that I think is missing, and what I respect and I think will do really well when your kids come of age is giving them direction, or more like guidelines, but letting them bounce around in that and make their own mistakes instead of giving them a hard set path. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I agree. And you said something, take it a step back. One of the things you were talking about kind of made a new connection in my brain. This is kind of a new thought, but I think it's really cool, and I want to explore it a little more. But we talked about, like, you know, if you have kids, or even like some of your students, Dan, like they may be curious and driven into other areas, all kinds of different pursuits. Like you went through a million different pursuits. I did too. I was a musician for a while. I tried to be a video director, an ad guy. I was in law school. I worked for a startup, and now I'm trying to be an entrepreneur online while I still work for my startup. And I think that's normal. I think that's healthy. I think it shows curiosity. I think correlates to some degree with intelligence. So if the fact that you're curious about a lot of different things is a good sign. It means that you are seeking information. That's a good sign that you're not a dummy, for the most part, if that's you. And what the new connection that I just thought of was, like, I can't imagine myself like putting one of my kids on a path. I mean, like, you need to go down this path. But what I can imagine doing, which makes so much sense now that I'm thinking about it, is making sure that they always understand, no matter what path they go down, that it's important to have a background of entrepreneurial understanding. Because it doesn't matter, like, certain professions are lower paid than others, but every profession can be much higher paid if you're the guy that owns the business. If you're the guy that hires out people, or that owns the company or whatever. So that's actually, and it falls in with a couple of the values that we've written for our family. We might need to revise them. You might have inspired me, Dan, to revise our family values for the first time in 2 years, or however long it's been. But I would love to encourage a basic understanding of, no matter what you want to do, have this understanding of what it takes to be an owner, what it takes to make your life your own business. And that's like an old concept from the Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that old book that everybody's read. But it's so true. And I think if you want to be a graphic designer, okay, great. You can go get hired to be a graphic designer and make peanuts in a lot of cases. Or you can start a graphic design agency, and you can be the guy who owns it and who sells it. And you can do that no matter what you're curious about, where you wind up making your career. You can always take it up a level by exploring the business side of it. And really, I think that's kind of unconsciously another connection I'm making now live with you on the podcast, is that's kind of what my dad did and my granddad did. They both had like traditional professions. My granddad was a salesman and my dad was a lawyer, but both of them took those professions and turned it into their own business. So my granddad started a textile brokerage firm, for lack of a better word, where he was the owner and also one of the top salesmen for them. And then my dad started his own law firm. And so you can, no matter what profession you're excited in and you're curious about, I would like to always emphasize that there's a deeper level to it. You can take it a step further, and that's where this sort of basic understanding of business and entrepreneurship comes in.
There's something you said that I don't know why it made me think this. So I forgot exactly what the word is too, but the way you worded things, it like screams like a masculinity point of view for me. And I don't know why this made me think of this, but it made me realize that I've learned the most about business not from like business books or business posts on, or like actionable business posts on Twitter or any other type of business account. It's always been from either accounts or books or other things that I was curious about, which is usually like spirituality or self-improvement, self-help, or something of that nature, productivity, and going through those. And somehow those showed me like, hey, I need to actually branch out and do something on my own. It's the weirdest thing. I don't really have a lesson behind that, but it's like if you have that drive and the strategies to actually make something work, then the business kind of follows suits and you learn what you have to along the way. And I was talking with Youssef with Propane Fitness earlier today, and we were talking about how performance, like most business problems or really any problem, is a performance-based problem. And I call it performance now because of Joey, but it's mostly like productivity and like being self-sufficient and being productive and, healthy habits, self-improvement, all of that good stuff. Like that's what leads into everything else, is just improving yourself. Like if you can improve yourself on a daily basis and continue improving yourself in every area of your life, not just the fitness part, not just the relationships part, but everything else, you realize that you need some form of autonomy to do that better. And so you go on a mission for more autonomy or more freedom or more time, so you can spend the time you need to actually improve those relationships or improve your fitness or master your craft even more. And then business teachings are kind of just like a side, something you learn on the side to actually help make that happen.
I'm with you.
So, yeah.
I
That's
think
kind of
I
just
think
a side train of thought.
well, I think like a lot people ask me all the time like why do I speak almost exclusively to men, and the reason I the answer I have is a simple answer is I am a man. I've never been a woman. I don't plan on ever being one, so I don't pretend to share or have any deep knowledge of their experience. And so I would feel like a fraud if I was trying to tell women like here's how you be a happy, fulfilled woman. Like I don't necessarily know that. But for me and for my perspective as a man in the U.S. in 2021, I can tell you what has led to happiness and fulfillment for me has been improving. And that's like
Right.
the keystone value that I have is like no matter what you're doing, you have to be getting better. And then there's all the habits that go along with that. You have to track your progress. You have to ensure that you're getting better, and you have to look backwards every now and then and reflect and say, what have I learned? And nothing ever happened for me until I adopted that mindset. Until I was like, wait a minute, if anything is going to happen for me in this life, it's going to be a result of my actions. There might be some luck and some serendipity, but even that's going to be a result of my actions, because it's going to be a result of me putting myself out there and me taking more shots and getting more reps. So if anything is going to happen for me in this life, it's going to be a result of me. And and the only way I'm going to be good enough for whatever happens to be up to my standards or something that I'm excited about, I'm going to have to improve myself. And I had that realization. The first time I had that realization, I was I was probably 23, like the first time I ever lifted weights seriously. And you see this change in your body, and you're like, wait a minute. And that's why I always tell guys, like, the first thing before you do anything else, if you're going on a self-improvement, self-discovery, self-actualization journey, lift weights. Step number one, the classic advice.
Yep.
And the reason I love it so much is because it's so obvious, the change that you're making in your body. You can't attribute it to anything other than the work that you put in, and it happens really, really quickly. If you're a noob, if you're in there for the first time, you're gonna see gains in a couple of weeks. You're gonna look different in a couple of weeks, and that can be the catalyst for every other thing in your life. That's what it was for me. It's like, wait a minute, I actually did something that had a tangible positive effect on myself and how I feel about myself and my place in the world. What else can I do? And that ethos, or whatever you want to call it, applied to everything else in my life. My school, from that moment on, I approached that differently. My hobbies, I approached those differently. What I was learning and what I was reading, I approached those differently. Anything I was building on the side, I approached that differently. All came back to this realization that, like, if I want anything out of this life, I have to do it myself. And if I'm going to do it myself, I have to be as good as I can possibly be. So I have to improve myself. And I think that's a really, at least for me and other men that I've talked to, a huge light bulb moment. And it gets to the heart of what drives us as guys. Is like, we need to be building something, even if that something is our physique or our mental clarity, whatever it is. We need to be building something, or else we're going to feel stagnant. And it's really, really hard to feel fulfilled and happy if you're stagnant.
Right. I know it's good to make that connection, because then you always have something to refer back to. Like, if you do feel stagnant and you do feel unfulfilled, it's like, okay, I got to find the next thing to build, and you have to actually pursue something that you're curious in, right? And looping back to that. But I've noticed that as well. And my life used to be much more cyclical, or the cycles used to happen much more often. It's much more sustained now. But like during college, I'd be in an upward phase where I got like super obsessed with building like a fitness brand or something else, and I'd build it for a while, and I'd be fucking happy as all could be and disciplined as all could be, and had a great time, enjoyed the process, as everyone tells you to do. And eventually I stopped seeing progress in that, and then I'd go on like a downward curve, and I'd start eating worse, and I'd wake up later, and I wouldn't be pursuing much. I'd be just going through the motions, going to class, hanging out with friends, drinking, doing all this other stuff, until that next cycle came where it's like, I am very curious in this. Like, I've heard about it so many times. I eventually started researching it, and then it kind of just takes off from there. And then the upward thing happened again. And what do you know? I was happy. I was fulfilled. Like, I was just having a good time building something that would potentially have a payoff. But I never really reached that point until down the road, after a few of those cycles. And now that I've made that connection that you just mentioned about having to build something, it's really hard to get off track for an extended period of time now. It's like, okay, I feel like shit. I don't want to feel like shit anymore. It's time to build something new. And all that really takes, in my eyes now, is I'm going to research something that I'm interested in, watch a few YouTube videos, and if I'm truly interested in it, I'm not going to stop researching it. Like, I'm going to be obsessed with that for a while, and then just keep building it. And that's that's kind of why I started Modern Mastery. That's why Modern Mastery is what it is because I've kind of given myself room to explore anything improvement related or building related. It's like, if like just building something is how you master the modern world. And so it's like, if I want to stop pursuing or stop putting out business content or stop putting out self-improvement content and switch to like crypto, which I'll probably never do, like, I could still make it work under this brand name. And so I don't know, not really a lesson there, but that's the reasoning behind this brand name. But
So do you
to
think
kind
you're
of
kind of you're building it to like allow for this natural curiosity that you know in yourself is cyclical. And so you kind of know yourself well enough to know that like you're going to get interested and passionate and obsessed with, but which by the way I identify with the obsession thing, like to an almost insane degree. People, it's
yeah,
like you get so obsessed with like a certain topic and it's all you can talk about, and people are like, what? Why are you still talking to me about intermittent fasting or whatever it is?
yeah,
And it's like, well,
yep,
because it's like because it makes me feel so good. But
yeah.
do you think that like your cyclical sort of journey leading you to modern mastery has do you think that this is the culmination of that, or do you think you've built something
Mhm.
that will allow you to continue exploring things that you're excited about, or is it somewhere kind of both?
It's so the what actually sparked it is the former. So that's what I realized is the recurring theme in my life and what has gotten me to a good place. And the result is being able to talk about any of these things and kind of like it just flows with that, right? It allows me to
Mhm.
continue doing that even though the cycles are much less. Because of that, I think maybe it was like a subconscious solution to reducing those cycles that I was having, like the building and then the just not doing anything for 3 months or so, and then finally getting back on it. So now this is like a constant reminder of, hey, I need to continue. Like this is something I can build no matter what I'm interested in at the time. But there's still the pillars of mind, body, spirit, business, because really anything falls under that. And those are just all things that I'm interested in. Like if I want to go on an intermittent fasting binge content wise for like a month, then I can and just get people on the intermittent fasting game. And it would actually be really helpful for the brand. So that's,
Yeah, more people need to try it. Is
they
what I
do. Yeah.
said.
Like I don't even give a shit if it's like I remember the reason I got into it is because people were saying like, oh, it helps boost your HGH and all this other like weird benefits. And I eventually learned that that's like minimal if null. And now it's more so it just fits my lifestyle really well. Like I wake up and I do my work in the morning and like coffee plus L-theanine plus intermittent fasting. It's like I can't ask for more. It's like I naturally just sit down and write or do something in terms of focused work. And then the rest of the day, it's like I can eat bigger meals and I can go out with friends if I want to, or do really anything while being able to maintain the physical fitness that I've built and not overeat in any way. Right. Because what I usually do is like I don't eat breakfast. So good amount of calories saved there. I don't eat a crazy lunch. I have my enlightenment smoothie before I go to the gym as like a pre-workout. And so after the gym, which is like an hour, hour and a half, it's like 2, 3 o'clock now. I have another pretty light meal. And then at the end of the day, it's like I have a ton of calories that I can use in really whatever way I want. And so it's like if I want to go out and go on a date and have a nice steak dinner, I don't have to feel guilty about that and I can just enjoy myself. Or if I just want to make like a huge beef, rice, and whatever I can pull out of the pantry, good to go in that regard too.
Yeah, man, it's like the best. Like I don't remember where I like first heard about it. Probably on like Reddit or something. But I've been hard on the IF train for like probably 4 or 5 years. It's been
Yeah,
that I haven't even looked back.
same. Yeah, I learned about it from Greg O'Gallagher. I do his style of training too. Uh, I do a bit more volume. He does like extremely low volume. It's hard for me to do that. But it's like 3 days a week. I do 4 days. But reverse pyramid training, I really like reverse pyramid training. If you haven't tried that out for like your big lifts, it's really fun. But I have a question.
What's
So
up?
why do you choose to stay anonymous?
I just really want everyone to see Andy Griffith and see me as Andy.
Yeah.
I just am spreading the gospel of Andy Griffith. No, there's a couple reasons that I've chosen to stay anonymous, and I think if the vision that I have for Save Your Sons gets to even halfway to where I have in my head, like I'm not gonna be able to be anonymous forever, and that's okay. But for right now, first of all, I'm a really private guy. I don't want like attention. I don't want to be. I'm not trying to sound like a big shot because I am not a big shot, but I don't want like people to like recognize me and be like, oh, you're the guy on Twitter or whatever. Like that's just not part of what gets me excited about going about my daily life. And so I really just don't want the attention. And another reason that I don't want the attention is because I want the message to be the message. I'm not trying to build a personal brand at this point. I'm trying to build a brand around a message and a vision. And I don't want to get in the way of that. The vision is what's important to me. The message is what's important to me. And the message is that if we can give young men the tools they need to approach their life intentionally, then they'll be engaged dads. They'll be ready and prepared to be engaged dads. And if they're engaged dads, we're going to see all these terrible effects of fatherlessness, all the bad things that happen when kids come along in a fatherless home. We're going to see those start to decline. And that's what I want to hammer home. And I really want to get that message out there. And to me, there's so many other distractions that can come along with me like throwing my face up there that it's for right now where I'm at in the journey and in the vision that I have for Save Your Sons. It's not part of it. But you know, if any business or any sort of social change movement, whatever you want to call it, gets big enough, like ultimately you have to come out from behind your Andy Griffith profile picture. So maybe one of these days, I'm sure one of these days it'll happen. But right now I really value my privacy and my anonymity, and especially considering how the account has grown, which is a total massive surprise. I really value it at this point. And I also don't want to distract from the message and the vision that I'm trying to plant in people's heads. I want that to be what's front and center.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, I don't really have a bias, whether it's like personal brand or whatever, but that's a good reason.
I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do. Like, it'd be hard for me to like sell fitness coaching if nobody had seen me. And they're like, how do I know that you're Dan? You've seen me now. And there's like a few people on Twitter who have seen me. There's a select lucky few, and that'll probably grow, and eventually I'll come out from behind the profile picture.
Yeah. I saw JK's tweet the other day where it's like, I saw Save Your Sons. He's jacked and has luscious hair, and I can attest to it. To it now. So it's I'm trying to grow out the luscious hair. I can never make it past like a certain point. It's been a bit longer than this before, but I'm trying to grow. I don't think I'll ever do a man bun, but I want like luscious.
Oh, dude,
looks.
I could totally get one of those going right now. But yeah, man,
Yeah.
you just hit on the real. You just hit on the real reason. It's just like it's too excruciatingly handsome. I don't want to do that to people. And so I'm surprised that you're out there because you have the same issue, man. It's like we're
Thanks,
just
man.
distractions.
Yep. I know. Nobody cares about the message. They just like the tweet because they see the profile picture.
That's it, man.
Yeah. No, it's weird, man. I'm waiting for that day when someone sees me in real life. Like I'm not I wouldn't say I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be an interesting experience. Like if I get spotted out, it's going to be really easy to spot me out. I mean, I'm tall and have the bushy hair, but like the only person I've met randomly was Joey Devlin at the gym. So That was cool. He's a cool dude. We did a podcast together. But
That's crazy. You
no,
just
man.
happen to go to the same gym.
Yeah, well, there's a pretty wild story behind why I was going to that gym, but I went there for a few days, and then I saw his girlfriend Kelly Flynn there, and we talked a bit, and I knew he was going to show up at some point, just like when I was there at some day, and so it ended up happening randomly, and then we met, talked, and yeah, it was cool. But in terms, so you keep talking about the vision behind Save Your Sons and the message behind Save Your Sons, and I'm sure we've covered a decent amount of it. But what's like the main message when you can't think of tweets to write, or you have to, or you feel like you're not putting out, because this happens to me, you feel like you're not putting things out there in alignment with that message. What do you come back to? What is that main message?
Yeah, I feel that way often. I mean, you know what it's like to you produce more content than I do because you got other channels going really well,
Mm,
by the way. And so you know what it's like
thanks.
when you're like, man, I gotta make content again. Like, what am I just like a content monkey who just like keeps producing and producing stuff? And I
Right.
definitely feel that sometimes. And when that happens, even with like Twitter's like probably the easiest thing to create content for when you compare it to like Instagram or YouTube or podcasts or whatever. But
Yeah.
what I always come back to is fatherlessness is the most important issue of our time. It is upstream from so many other bad social outcomes that we experience in our society. Poverty is linked to fatherlessness. Drug addiction is linked to fatherlessness. Violence and crime are linked to fatherlessness. Prison rates are linked to it. Mental illnesses are linked to it. Self harm is linked to it. All of these terrible things that happen in our society are more likely to happen to a kid who grows up without a dad in the house. The statistics are undeniable. And so, what I come back to is that's the key. That's what I'm trying to solve. I want to do something about that. I want that rate of fatherlessness to go down. And there's a few ways to achieve that. And that's so fatherlessness is upstream from a ton of these bad things. There's a few things that are upstream from fatherlessness. And there's it's politics, it's the media, and it's family life. And I have plans to address the politics and the media side, but that's years down the road. You need a lot more money before you can really make a dent in those. But what I can do right now, today, is I can help men address the family side. I can give
Mm,
men the tools that were helpful for me to take control of my life, to find happiness, to find fulfillment, to find purpose. And if I can teach other men those things and get them living in that way, they're going to be there for their kids. They're going to be, whether they're dads now or they're thinking about becoming dads in the future, they're going to be able to play their part in reducing that rate of fatherlessness. And so that's the primary objective right now today is to pour into men and young men and give them the tools they need to be present and engaged dads, whether that time has already come or whether that time is imminent. I want them to be ready and I want them to be there for their kids so that their kids aren't another one of those statistics. And that pattern that'll have a ripple effect that goes down generation after generation if we address the family first.
mm. I like that, man. And this makes I cannot speak on this at all. I mean, kind of. I come from the point of improving myself and becoming a high value man, but the concept of marriage or marrying the right person. I've tried to think this through like multiple times just when I'm sitting around and have nothing else to think about. Do you think that even if you marry the wrong person, which I feel like is a difficult thing to do, but since divorce rates are so high, I feel like you can technically marry the wrong person. Even if you do marry the wrong person, what is, once you realize that, is there a specific route that you should take? Like, is there a way to mend that relationship or at least maintain it so you can still be there fully for your kids without like a split household. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Because I still don't really have a solidified question for that. It's like, if you marry the wrong person, is there a way to still maintain that family relationship so you can be there the best you can for your kids?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a huge question, and divorce rates are sky high. They've actually gotten a little better recently, which is promising. I don't know if that's a function of people just getting married later or what, but they are slowly declining, which is great. There's a few different things that could inform the way you answer that question. I mean, if you decided you married the wrong person, did you decide you married the wrong person because you just don't like them that much, like you guys aren't compatible, or did you marry the wrong person because the person that you married is violent and dangerous, or they're addicted to drugs and they're refusing to get help, or whatever? Like there's a couple different buckets that you could fall into if you're having these thoughts of like, I'm with the wrong person, or this person was unfaithful to me, whatever. Like there's a few different ways to think about it, and I have kind of a what I realize is a controversial stance on this, but my personal opinion is, and again, I preface this by saying I know that this is in the minority, but absent violent patterns, absent a pattern of criminal behavior, and absent a pattern of sort of unresolved substance abuse or untreated substance, mental illness, whatever you want to call it. Not all mental illness, but mental illness as it correlates or as it's associated with substance abuse. Mm-hmm. Absent those things, and absent most cases absent of adultery, if none of that is present, my opinion is you got to make it work. It's better for the kids to make it work. And most times, if those things aren't present and your relationship just kind of sucks, and you just kind of like don't really like each other, you can get through that. You can get past that. And you have to understand that there is some measure of sacrifice. Yeah, you may not be with the best possible match that you could have ever been with. Okay, but you've got kids now, and those kids are incredible, and you love them more than anything. And if you believe that the best thing for them is to have two married parents who are walking in lockstep through their lives and teaching them intentionally and doing all these things we talk about, then at a certain point, you got to say, you know what? Like, I'm going to make this work. I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to make it work. And a lot of guys that are in that position, what I think they don't realize, and a message that I try to share as much as I can, is that if your wife is making your life miserable, the word that guys use is like nagging, and that's a loaded word too. So I'm not going to get too into that. But if you're just kind of constantly bickering and never feel like there's no loving back and forth between the two of you, men really underestimate the role that we play in those scenarios, in those situations. And one of the courses that I wrote for Save Your Sons University a couple months ago outlines what I think can help a lot of guys get out of that situation. Because there's a lot that men can do to fix a situation where if you're with your wife and you feel like you just feel like it's not a good relationship. No one's being violent, no one's being a criminal, no one's cheating, but you're fighting all the time and you're bickering and you're kind of secretly hoping that this thing will end and you can go on to the next thing. Men can do a lot to change that. Because at some point, presumably, you had a good relationship with this woman. At some point, presumably, you had really good times together and you guys were in love. And at some point along the way, 99 times out of 100, the man has stopped doing the things that he was doing when he attracted her or when they were attracted to each other in the first place. And so a man needs to look like, women are not blameless in these situations at all. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm, again, only suggesting what I have experience with and with what I know, which is the perspective of a man. And we can do things to reverse that. I mean, if you're a man and you're in a rut in your relationship, well, look at yourself. Are you worse off or better off than you were when you guys got married? How much weight have you gained? How much strength have you lost? How much energy have you lost? How much motivation and drive have you lost? Are you still cracking jokes? Do you still smack her butt when you walk in the room? No, you've probably quit doing those things. And so you're not the same guy that she liked in the first place. So of course your relationship's going to be different. And so there's a whole list of things that I try to help guys with, to at least like go down and do this discovery process to say, well, there are all these things that I do have a big role in why my relationship kind of feels crappy and why we're fighting and bickering. And if you address these things, and ultimately it boils down to self-improvement, you're going to want to improve yourself. So if you start doing that and you start living for your purpose, and you don't live to just kind of limp along in your relationship, or live to serve her or whatever, that's the last thing you want to do. If you live for yourself and you become the man that attracted her in the first place, and you become a man who's living for a broader vision and something exciting, women's behavior a lot of times will change suit. They'll follow right along. They're just, we're waiting for us to do something about it. And that's what we do. We don't do something about it by having all night long conversations and talking about why oh my gosh, well, I feel like it's so different than it was before. Yeah, it's different. And it can stop being different if the man gets up and does something, and he goes and creates himself and creates his life. That's what she's waiting for you to do a lot of the times.
Nice. I fall in line. I, again, am not married, can't really say this, but I agree with your minority opinion. And have you read The Way of the Superior Man?
I haven't, man. It's been recommended to me so much. I was crushing books so well right before our son was born, and then I'm making like the classic I don't have time dad excuse as to why my reading has fallen off a cliff recently. But that one's on my list. I got to get to it.
It's really good. The message is pretty much what you just said, but it's like, I don't know if I'd call it woo-woo. I guess that is determined by like the perspective of the reader, but it can seem kind of woo-woo. But it talks about like the masculine feminine dynamic, and how one, presence is a man's greatest trait, but also being dead set on pursuing his purpose, and like other things that I don't like the word submissive. I feel like red pill Twitter has just ruined that word for me. But like it teaches you how to quote unquote make women submit because of your I don't even know if I'd call it traditional, but masculine energy. Like
and I stay away from that terminology as well for a lot of reasons. But what another way to think about it is, no woman, and this is not unique to women, by the way, I'll explain how it affects men too, but in the context of a relationship, a heterosexual relationship, no woman wants to be a man's only option. She does not want to be with you if she thinks no one else can get you, if she thinks no one else wants you, if she thinks no one else will have you. And that is, men are affected by that too, to a lesser degree than women when it comes to relationships. But we still buy into this social proof thing. Like if we're buying a product, we're more likely to buy a product if it has good reviews. We're more likely to go see a movie if other people have told us that it's good. It's the same thing that's happening to us when we make those sort of decisions that's happening to a woman when she's in a relationship with us. If she starts getting a sense that we're kind of a loser, and that no other girl thinks would ever sleep with us, well, why the hell would she be attracted to you? Who wants to be somebody's only option? Nobody does. Like, I don't want to, like, again, like, men are a little different in this way. Like, we could find a woman that, and probably find, like, a way to love her if no other man does. I don't think girls are hot just because other guys say that they're hot. But women, to a large degree, kind of are susceptible to that in the same way men are in other areas. And so if you are the only one that, if she's the only one that you could possibly get, of course she's going to be mad. Of course she's going to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm settling. This guy is only with me because he can't have anyone else. How is that going to make her feel? It's going to make her feel bad. That's understandable. That's human. And that's a big piece of a man's role in that relationship dynamic, because she's going to act out in certain ways. If she starts feeling that way, she's going to say, well, that's when a lot of the fighting starts. That's when a lot of the, for lack of a better word, like nagging, again, I hate that word, but that's when she's like, upset with you all the time and you feel like you can't do anything right. A lot of the times, the reason she's feeling that way is because she thinks you're a loser. She thinks you couldn't get anyone else. And so what's the answer to that? The answer to that isn't to sit down and tell her like, "Oh, I just feel like you're treating me like you're not treating me well. You don't treat me the way you used to." The answer to that is to stop being a loser. The answer to that is to go do something awesome. The answer to that is to make yourself great. Go find what your vision, what mark you were meant to make on this world, and don't stop until you've made it. That's what she wants, and that's what'll change a lot of those behavior patterns.
Beautiful. I like that a lot. And I feel like
I tried to say it in a way that wouldn't get me canceled.
get you what?
Canceled.
Oh, yeah.
I think I'm safe. I don't know. We'll see.
No, you're good. No, that was said. That was really well said. I like your way of wording that more. Like I vibe with that kind of wording, as opposed to like the other kinds of wordings. But
yeah, I mean, like nobody wants to be anyone's only option, and
right.
As men, we're not going to go buy a course on Gumroad if it has one review and it's 1 star. You know, like we all fall into this stuff, and it's the same thing that's happening with a woman when she looks at you and you're a 1-star guy. Like no one else wants to buy you. No one else wants to have you. Like of course she's gonna be like, ah man, what am I doing?
Yeah, we need a that could be a tweet. Don't be a 1-star on Gumroad.
Yeah, don't be a one. Because if you get 1 star, you got to refund them anyway. Get them out of the you get them out of your analytics.
There's so many connections between like sales and relationships. I mean, that's what it is. Sales is relationships, but social proof is definitely powerful in terms of attracting females. So I have one last question for you, and I haven't asked this to anyone before. It's a question that came to me before this podcast, but is there a tweet that you've put out and that you remember that didn't do very well and you felt like it had a very powerful message that more people needed to hear, or at least like listen to?
Man. Oh man, I'm sure if I like went and like searched my timeline, I could find one. Oh man.
That's a difficult question. I wouldn't be able to answer it, so you're not obligated.
I wish I had an answer. I don't want to give you a bunch of dead air. I'm trying to think.
No, you're good. Or if you can't think of one, what's one message that you think people don't pay much attention to, but it's actually very important?
Okay, hang on. I think I got one for you.
All right.
All right, I got 2. All right, I cheated.
Nice.
I looked at my timeline. All right, so this one's from just a couple of days ago, and it was, if you want to get lucky, take more shots. And it got kind of good engagement, I guess. Like people like engage with it, but I don't think people really understood what I was attempting to get at. And what I was attempting to get at was, so then I like had to explain myself in like tweets below it. And if you're doing that, you're already losing. Like, if you're like explaining yourself that you didn't communicate the original message well enough to begin with. But what I was trying to get at is luck is real. Luck is a real part of life. Serendipitous occurrences are a real thing that happen. But they're only going to happen if you give yourself the opportunity to encounter those serendipitous occurrences. So you can take 100 shots, 100 full court shot, or you can take one. You can take one full court shot on a basketball court. One full court shot. You might get lucky and you might hit it. You might. You probably won't, though. You'll probably miss. But if you take 100 full court shots, you're going to hit a few of them. You're going to get lucky. They're still going to be lucky shots, but you're going to hit a few of them. You're going to get lucky a few times. And that's how luck works in our lives as well. So don't discount luck and say it's all just complete chance. Yes, it is serendipity. Yes, there are certain things that happen in our lives that are lucky. But the more we expose ourselves to those potential occurrences and those people who can make those decisions for us that can give us lucky breaks or whatever it is, the more likely that is to happen. And the message is, go out, put yourself out there. take shots, take more reps, and you're more likely to get lucky.
Yeah, it's like the whole roll of the dice metaphor. Like if you are aiming for a one or really any number, just whatever desired outcome you want, rolling it once, you have whatever percent chance. Rolling it 100 times, you're probably going to hit that number eventually. And yeah, I've always loved thinking about that concept after putting in the reps. Is like if we always use Twitter as a example because that's where we built a lot of this, and that's where a lot of our luck is generated. Yeah.
Way too much
It's
time
like,
thinking about it.
yeah, it's like we've gotten to this point where we have pretty massive followings, and that opens up so many fucking opportunities, man. Like if I wanted to go and I will get Jordan Peterson on this podcast one day. So if I wanted to go and get Jordan Peterson on this podcast, I probably could right now. If I had 0 followers and like was just starting out this podcast, the percentage of whatever luck to get Jordan Peterson on this podcast is like 0% if I had none of this built up already. And even if I like only built up a following and talked about some stuff and like that was my sole purpose, was to build it up to have a higher percentage of getting Jordan Peterson on a podcast, then like that solidifies the point there of shooting more shots. Shots in this case being tweets and replies and whatever else you have to do to grow.
Yeah, that's it, man.
Yes, but we've been on here for almost an hour and a quarter, so
Dang,
I think that's a good time. I know. I think that's a good time to call it, but man, I appreciate you coming on. This was a fucking great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and a lot of different perspectives from the other podcasters. I don't think I've had would you consider yourself, what would you categorize yourself as? It's not masculinity, is it? I'm sure that's part of it, but
I think so. I mean, I think it's embracing masculinity, because I think that's what men have to do most of the time to be happy. They have to lean into their sort of natural masculine desires and urges and inclinations. And then really, like, the biggest piece of a masculine inclination is self-improvement. And so to me, that's kind of where it all comes back to. It's like the way we fix anything is by making ourselves better and by living by a code of values. And if you can do those two things, the world's going to be a much more beautiful place, not least of all because you're going to have many more fathers in it.
Nice. But yeah, great perspectives. I feel like the listeners will really like this. And so if you guys do like this, let us know on Twitter. Just tag either Save Your Sons or I. And Brother Save Your Sons, I'll let you tell the people where they can find you and what you can help them with and what they can, like shameless plugs, what you have to offer.
Yeah, buddy. So you can find me at Save Your Sons on Twitter. It's just all one word. You can go to my website at saveyoursons.com. When you're on the website, you're going to learn about Save Your Sons University. Save Your Sons University is our private online community for men. It's uncensored message boards, it's curated masculinity content, and it's private chats between other men who are sort of on the same self-development journey that you are. And it's a place where you can discuss issues that men have that we don't necessarily want to discuss out in public, that we can't necessarily discuss out in public for whatever reasons. And we've got a lot of guys in there. We're helping guys build habits, fix relationships, fix their personal finances, fix their health, all kinds of things, all with the idea that we're trying to help them become more fulfilled men and ultimately more engaged dads, so that we have more present, more happy, more excited dads in this world.
Nice. I love it, man. I keep forgetting to join. I'll join right after this. Is yours on Circle as well?
Yeah, what it is, it's a Circle community with with like a pretty active actually message board system that we've built out. So it's like it's not quite like Discord where it's like immediate chat. It's like people will say like I'm struggling with ABC thing, and then guys will come in and say here's what I think you should do. And there's just a ton of new comments and posts every day from guys. And then you also get every month a new course from me that I developed that's like a podcast format. It's like an hour-long podcast that's a life lesson that was helpful for me. So it's like how a man should behave in a relationship. It's how to begin a weight training program. It's how to make yourself as attractive as possible to the opposite sex. So courses around those life lessons that you'll get every month as well.
Dude, I love that. Dude, this is why I love, not, I guess it's not personal branding, but just like social media in general is like you build a brand around your vision and then you can earn a living through that message. Like, it's so cool to me to see. Like, I've been in this game for a good amount of time, but like even now, like hearing that, even what I'm doing in Modern Mastery and what a lot of other people are doing, it's like you're just helping people get better. It's so fun and so fulfilling. And like, I don't think you see that outside. You don't see that really anywhere else, because if it's not like a brand on social media, or if it's like a big, like very impersonal brand where they have a premeditated product where it's like iffy lessons dished out. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but it's just really cool to see. It's really cool to see, and I encourage anyone and everyone to at least shoot your shot. Shoot more
take
shots,
those chances, man.
Whatever the tweet was. Was it shoot more shots? No, it wasn't shoot more shots.
Take more shots.
Take more shots. Take more shots, my friends. That's the lesson of this entire podcast. And the lesson of our entire life. I think that's a good way to wrap everything up. So, my man, I appreciate you for coming on, and everyone else, thank you for listening. Go check out Save Your Sons. We'll have all of his links in the show notes, and we will see you in the next one.
Thank you, brother.
My friends, thank you so much for listening to that episode of the Modern Mastery podcast. I have a few favors to ask you. For a whopping $0, you can support this podcast by following, rating, and subscribing on whatever platform you are listening on. And for an additional $0, you can share this podcast on your social media accounts, tag me in it at @TheDanCo, and I will share you on the community page. This truly helps the Modern Mastery community and podcast grow and allows me to bring you top tier guests to fuel your hunger for wisdom. It costs $0, but it does cost you your time, and we understand how valuable that can be. But considering you spent an hour or so listening to this podcast, a 1-minute subscribe or follow button click and social media share isn't too much to ask. And if you truly enjoyed it, we would hope that you do this out of the kindness of your heart, and we truly appreciate it. And the second favor, which costs money, is joining Modern Mastery HQ, the only platform you need to master your mind, body, and spirit while building a 5 to 10K a month online business as a creator, coach, freelancer, or entrepreneur. You can go to join.modernmastery.co to join 350 plus members and gain instant access to information that has the potential of making you hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime as a business owner. With that, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Modern Mastery podcast, and I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.